Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Farmers Insurance Data Dive Show. A lot to get into, exciting show as we get ready for the adjusted tournament schedule. Again, if you aren't aware, the Farmers Insurance this week is going from Wednesday to Saturday. So we've got one less day to prepare our wagers, our DFS lineups and such. So we've got a lot to get into. Which reminds me that because of the shortened week, the DFS Tactics show will move to tomorrow night. Don't worry, I won't be streaming DFS Tactics on on Wednesday when the tournament's already started. So make sure you set your reminders. Tomorrow evening at 9 p.m. the DFS Tactics show will be live. As always, all statistics are provided by FantasyNational.com. Amazing resource. It's going to be well worth the investment. Go check it out. It's going to make you a much better gambler, much better DFS player. I can't say enough about it. And then in the description, there are links to my social media as well as an email to reach out to me if you want to be part of bonus content that I send out to my subscribers. My own version of a tournament fact sheet, bonus videos, bonus content, and such. And the social media is where I post my betting cards for the week, as well as any interesting research or findings throughout the week leading up to the tournament and through the tournament. And then lastly, chat is open, it's live. I really want to hear from you all. Who are some guys that you're thinking about? What are some statistics or metrics or ideas that you've either heard or you think about when you think Torrey Pines. So want some good discussion in there, jump in chat. And if you aren't watching live, make sure you jump into the comments. I'll always get to any questions or anything there after the video as well. So with all that out of the way, let's dig into the data for the 2022 Farmers. And we transition over here, as we always do, to Fantasy National to start the Data Dive show. And we get situated here. We looked at a few kind of overhead statistics last night after we went through the breakdown and the tournament history and whatnot. So I think I'm going to start, like usual. The first metric that we always look at is putting when we look at previewing a tournament. We look at green type, generally speeds and such. This one's a little bit unique in that it's POA, and there's not very many POA courses on the PGA Tour, and they're almost exclusively on the West Coast with a few exceptions. So I went ahead and have filtered to the last year, because in the last 6 months there have been no POA courses. So in the last year, and we're just looking strictly at POA here, we've got Bethpage Black, Chambers Bay, Chapultepec, which used to be the WGC Mexico. We've got Detroit Golf Club. That is the Rocket Mortgage, I believe. Then, so that one's always on in the Rota. We've got Monterey Peninsula, which is part of the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. That's an alternate course there. Of course, Pebble Beach. Riviera, which is a very good comparison course, to be honest with you, with the Torrey Pines. You got the Kikuyu, fairways and rough, POA greens. It's long. It lines up pretty darn well when looking at a side-by-side comparison course. Riviera, Shinnecock Hills, Spyglass, which is the third of the Pebble Beach courses that are used in the Rota. So Pebble Beach is another good course to kind of look at for comparison courses, although it's just not as long as this one, but you still get some good ideas there. And then lastly is TBC River Highlands for the Travelers. Has been POA in the past, which It's hard to believe, but it is listed here under Fantasy National. So, like I said, there's not a lot of courses. A lot of these are majors and whatnot. But on POA greens, and I definitely use the fast filter for this week. The POA greens at Torrey are notoriously fast. Sometimes they're lightning, but most of the time they're just fast. So I think the first statistic that we looked at last night was putting, and the top 10 putters on fast POA greens in the past year are Bryce Garnett, JT Poston, Ryan Palmer, Mark Leishman, Matt Jones, Hank Lebioda, Doug Gim, Will Zalatoris, Xander, and Sepp Straka. So good stuff there. And then we also looked at some long course metrics, some difficult course metrics. One of the big things that I do, just because I value this type of player, I always look at strokes gained approach, and I take a pretty full size view, and I try to do a lot of rounds in as little time as possible. I just want to see who's dialed in with the irons, and I take as many rounds as I can just to get a good baseline. Some guys can have a good tournament, but generally strokes gained approach evens out, or to use data terms, regresses to the mean when over a long period of time. And when you have 36 rounds, you get pretty confident that this is truly the kind of golfer they are. So strokes gained approach, past 36 rounds, top 10 here are Daniel Berger, Hudson Swafford, Taylor Gooch, Justin Thomas, Tom Hoagie, Will Zalatoris, Mito Pereira, Hideki, Ches Reavie, and Corey Connors. So we've got a little bit of overlap here. I didn't mention Daniel Berger in the putting, but he was about 12th or 13th. You have Will Zalatoris, who popped on both. I can't remember if Gooch did or not, but iron players, generally the best in the world, tend to rise here. John Rahm is just outside the top 10 in strokes gained approach. So there's your top 10 in strokes gained approach. And then the last thing I kind of wanted to recap here, we looked at long courses. I can't remember if we looked at difficult, but I'm definitely going to be looking at difficult scoring relative to par. Torrey Pines South, notoriously very, very difficult. I'm going to bring this out to the last 12 months just because there's, in the fall swing, and especially with the Aloha, Sony, and American Express, those are all generally pretty easy tournaments with the exception of Memorial, or not Memorial, the Houston Open at Memorial Park in November. So I'm going to bring it back out to the last year, calendar year. And the best players on difficult, at least scoring relative to par courses: Jordan Spieth, Patrick Reed, John Rahm, Cameron Tringali, Scotty Scheffler, Hideki, Xander, Berger, Aaron Wise, and Bryson DeChambeau, and Corey Connors, excuse me. So DeChambeau and Connors are tied for 10th. Again, some more overlap. You would expect the best players play really well when it gets difficult. You've got John Rahm, who is irons and difficulty. Matsuyama now, irons and difficulty. Berger has been there in all three, or at least Berger was 13th or so in putting. Aaron Wise, putting and difficulty. So you're starting to see a lot of overlap, and it's going to be a pretty common theme tonight. As I was doing my research, I noticed guys were generally trending to the top as well. So that is, I think, going to be the recap that I wanted to cover for you all. But let's get into some new stuff that we didn't look at in the initial research show. And a lot of it's going to focus on this. I really looked at difficult scoring conditions, or at least relative to par, in my data today. Kind of sliced and diced that in a multitude of different ways. Torrey Pines South, again, notorious for being difficult. The U.S. Open was here last year. Now, the course definitely won't be set up as difficult as it was for a U.S. Open, but it's still going to be difficult. It's going to be a good idea to kind of look and see who played well at last year's Open, just to get a feel for guys who probably, at least in my mind, probably putting was the big thing. Guys who hit the fairways or greens. There's only so much they can do with Torrey Pines because of the lack of the water and honestly, really lack of sand around the course. It is just a long, narrow fairway stretch of rough, essentially. I mean, the fairways are very narrow, like I said. There are bunkers you have to navigate and such, but it is just seemingly a green mile of death. So one of the first things that I did today when I started looking is this strokes gained total, which we just looked at. But what comes in a lot of times with difficulty relative to par is this long rough. And Torrey Pines has always had long rough, or at least most of the time it's had long rough. And with that, we mentioned last night how important Kikuyu is going to be with it. Kikuyu being very sticky, very difficult to chip out of if you're not used to it. So one of the things that was surprised me was how much around the green kind of played into the leaderboard, kind of hidden. So the top 10 around the green performers, and let's see, this is in long rough, by the way, so there's only 24 rounds to consider, but this is long rough around the green. Sahith Theegala, Michael Thompson, Sung J M, Jimmy Walker, Scott Koszewski are your top 5, followed by Andrew Novak, Daniel Berger again, Justin Thomas again, David Lipsky and Brant Snedeker, Hoagie and Reevy both lurking just outside the top 10. So you're starting to see a couple of guys who are really popping on a lot of these metrics. Berger has been in all of them, basically. Now, granted, this is just 4 rounds, so take it with a tad bit of grain of salt. This was all at the BMW. If we come out to the last 12 months, that was just in the past 6 months, but the last 12 months now, and I'll expand it to the last 36 rounds. So a more full picture of who plays around the green well in long rough. Patrick Reed, Michael Thompson, Taylor Gooch, Heath Theegala, Tony Finau, your top 5. Jordan Spieth, Hank Lebioda, Scotty Scheffler, Ricky, and Camilo Villegas are now your top 10. So Patrick Reed, no surprise, well known for his short game prowess. Jordan Spieth, same thing. Michael Thompson has now been on both of the around the green metrics. Theegala has been on both of the around the green metrics. So that was one of the first things that I had noticed in really digging into the data, was this around the green. And let me show you why or how I found this. So this is last year's kind of strokes gained leaderboard per se, and it doesn't jump out to you immediately. Of the guys that finished in the upper part of the leaderboard, you've got your strokes gained approach. Off the tee was somewhat important. The putting, you would imagine, is very top heavy. Guys who make putts are just going to generally rise to the top of the leaderboard anyway. But again, you don't see a lot of correlation here with a little bit of red. But let me sort it by the strokes gained around the green. And you start to get a better picture of how strokes gained around the green gives you maybe not upper tier success, but this is a pretty strong correlation here. Your winner, Patrick Reed, again, always known for his short game, was the winner. But you had a top 20, a top 30, one of the runner-ups, another top 30, top 10, another of the runner-ups, top 20, 10, 20, and a 20 down here. So, this is about 16 guys, give or take, and you don't have any missed cuts. You have really only 3 clunkers of made cuts. Well, maybe 4 if you count Gary Woodland. So you've got a 48th, a 75th, 53rd, 60th. And then Bill Haas kind of right on the edge there, 42nd. And, Bill Haas is always known for his short game anyway. So 2021, around the green was somewhat important. But if you continue to go back in years, so this is 2020, strokes gained around the green again, it wasn't important for Leishman when he won. There's a lot of green in here. So if you sorted by strokes gained around the green, this one was a lot less. So Jason Day, your top 20. And then you had a lot of really, like I said, clunker of made finish or made cut finishes. But down here, Harry Higgs, top 10, Rory, top 5, top 10, top 10, top 15. A lot less important in 2020. But I think what I'm trying to get at here is something that we looked at last night is the metrics year over year. And I'm going to switch to Excel view here real quick. So when you see around the green here, last year, the 2021 was 50th for, importance. But notice 2021, 50th. 2020, we noticed that there wasn't a lot of correlation at all. But notice that this is a pretty severe outlier compared to the other years. So if you take this one out, you have a minimum of 43 and a maximum of 54. That's pretty consistent in range of importance. And if you go by average, which is what this metric is, you take out that 66, the average, which you can't see down here, is now 45. Yeah, 45. No, excuse me, 48. So a lot more important, puts it much more close to the approach and the putting. So when I started digging into that today, and I'll do one more year as we come back to Fantasy National, the biggest year, I believe, was 19 or 17. I'll just do 19 because it's the past 3 years. Strokes gained around the green. Again, doesn't look like much, but there's really only 4 guys that are negative, and notice how little in the negative they are. They're almost field average, just a little bit below. Strokes gained around the green in 2019. Again, the leaders in this category were clunkers, but you have a top 20, top 25, another top 20, top 20, top 5, top 5, top 10, top 15, top 10 winner. And this is all in, again, the same kind of top 16-ish performers around the green. Those were their finishes. So, again, it's not a strong direct correlation, but it's a little bit hidden. And I think it's going to play a factor this week, especially knowing that the course is difficult. In combination with strokes gained around the green, there's going to be a lot of scrambling that's going to be needed. And the problem with looking back at a prior year's data is that scrambling is normally in this tab in Fantasy National. There's no scrambling listed for the week, at least in Fantasy National. It's just sand saves. But sand saves isn't what we're looking for because there's not a lot of sand here at Torrey Pines. We're looking at scrambling. And scrambling, again, like I mentioned, is in the fairways and greens metric. So I really looked at a lot of this too today, the scrambling gained. So again, I'm showing you all what I found when I really dug into the data today. I'm going to bring it back to 2021 because we're going to come back to the strokes gained and all of these here in a bit. But since we're here, I'm now going to bring this out to the, or narrow its focus, to the last 6 months. Still 36 rounds, but In the scrambling department, I'm now going to put it on difficult relative to par instead of long rough. Just because when you start thinking about scrambling, you generally think about it being difficult and whatnot. And I keep forgetting that I need 12 months for the difficult metric. I apologize for that. So this top 10 scramblers when it is difficult relative to par. Your top 10: Cameron Tringali, Robert Strebe, Sung Jae, Justin Thomas, Bezadenhout, Patrick Reed, Matt Jones, Jordan Spieth, Mark Leishman, and Ricky Fowler. So now you're starting to get a clear picture of who plays these tough courses well, especially who kind of saves their pars, which coincides with the bogey avoidance we kind of looked at last night. So you've got Justin Thomas, who was on the difficult metric, a little bit of the around the green. Patrick Reed, no surprise. Jordan Spieth, no surprise. Ricky Fowler's now popped a couple of times on the around the green specific metrics. Now scrambling on difficult and around the green and short rough, around the green and long rough. The theme, a lot of overlap in the guys' stats that they happen to be good at. While we're on this tab as well, for me, I like this good drives gained metric, especially when greens and regulation tend to matter. What a good drive is definition-wise in Fantasy National is a drive that is either one, hit the fairway, or if it misses the fairway, the player still hits the green in regulation. And I would have thought that good drives gained would be a very good metric to use this week. With the narrow fairways, if guys are hitting the fairways, that's fantastic. But those guys, the guys that miss the fairway, can they still hit the greens? The problem is this is all-encompassing. It doesn't take into consideration the rough that Torrey Pines notoriously has. It's very long, generally close to 4.5 inches. So instead, I went just with greens and regulation, but I made sure I kept the difficult metric on. So the top 10 greens and regulation on difficult conditions or difficult relative to par: John Rahm, Corey Connors, Hideki, Aaron Wise, Daniel Berger are your top 5. Hank Lebioda, Xander, Joaquin Niemann, Kevin Streelman, and Bryson DeChambeau. So again, your more upper tier, upper echelon players. Daniel Berger has popped a couple times, or a lot basically. Rahm, same thing. Corey Connors. This is the metric that I ended up going with, and I feel fairly confident with it, just because, as I mentioned, this doesn't really take into consideration the rough, whereas this does so a lot better. Yes, I could do rough length, long, and greens and regulation, and we can look at that perhaps a little bit later, but I felt like this was going to be more apt for Torrey Pines, knowing that it's difficult, it's long, and whatnot. I mentioned last night how it seems like distance isn't that big of a deal here at Torrey Pines, even though the course is long. Well, that was me being incorrect a little bit. It is not as important as you would think it is, but it does play a factor. So let's bring back the leaderboards, go back to the distance here, and again, it doesn't look like a lot. Your winner, Patrick Reed, has never relied on distance. Last year, Sabatini, same thing. He is not long at all. Molinari, Shelton. But when you sort by driving distance, the top performers, you see a little bit different of a picture. You got a top 20, a top 10, some very, middling finishes, miscut by Cameron Champ, who is always going to be there in the distance category. But you come down from there, top 10, top 35. You got a runner-up, and then just under the top, say 20 or so, runner up, top 10, runner up. So it's kind of like the around the green in that it is not a direct in your face correlation, but there is some here, and it is pretty darn consistent year over year. So if we look at 2020 distance, again, you've got really three guys here, and it kind of throws you off a little bit, seeing three of the top 6 or 7 or so be negative in driving distance. Then you come down, there is a lot of positive here, all the way down to the 25th finish or whatever. So if you sort again by driving distance, top 20, just outside the top 20, 21st, middling, top 5, top 25, top 10, top 30, top 30, top 20, runner up. So hopefully this is showing the point here. Driving distance does matter a little bit, and we'll look at 2019 just for one more year of data. It's top 5, top 25, top 20, top 10, top 5, winner. So driving distance is there. It matters a little bit. So with that being the case, again, we'll come back to these tabs, but I like to reset it just in case. Driving distance. I'm going to remove the difficult relative to par. Just straight driving distance the past 6 months. Matthew Wolff is actually number 1 in driving distance over DeChambeau, which was surprising to me. I mean, Wolff is long, everybody knows that, but to be longer than DeChambeau, longer than Cameron Young and Taylor Pendrith, who hit it a mile, longer than Cameron Champ even. Cameron Champ's actually down here at 13th in driving distance. But anyway, top 10 driving distance past 6 months. Matthew Wolff, Bryson DeChambeau, Joseph Bramlett, Taylor Pendrith, Johnny Vegas, Cameron Young, Brandon Hagee, Trey Mullinex, Luke List, and Tyler McCumber are your top 10. And again, that doesn't factor anything other than distance. So, no difficult to hit fairways, no difficult relative to par, no wind metrics, which we'll really look into the wind tomorrow for the DFS Tactics show. But early looks, it looks a lot like last week at the Amex. There's one round where it could get windy, but a lot of it is just calm. Something that I actually didn't look at today, and it kind of struck my fancy just now. Let's look at driving distance when it's difficult to hit the fairway. Because if hitting the fairway is going to be a premium this week, you would think it would be a premium. It's actually so-so here. But it's always good to see driving distance when it's difficult to hit the fairway. Your top 10. Matthew Wolff is number 1 now in distance overall and distance when it's difficult to hit the fairway. So Matthew Wolff, Taylor Pendrith, Johnny Vegas, Cameron Young, Bryson, Joseph Bramlett, Luke List, Brandon Hagee, Will Zalatoris, and Trey Mullinex. So a lot of overlap. I mean, guys that just hit it far, they don't care. Distance does matter a little bit. I'm definitely going to have a percentage of it in the final mixed condition model, probably just 5%. But it is a factor. It definitely is a factor. And then something else that we kind of talked about last night, but didn't really go into it, was the proximity. And we looked at it, we only skimmed it, but we come to the breakdown, the course breakdown, and we'll get to the par 4s here in a bit. I mentioned last night I was really curious about this, considering 60% of the par 4s here are of this length. We'll get to that. But I was really curious about the 175 and the 200, since the majority of the approach shots come from this distance, and to see if this had any bearing on performance, at least leaderboard performance. So we'll come back to last year. We're going to go look at proximity. We did look at 2021. The first thing we looked at was 175 to 200, and it was not a lot of correlation, really. I mean, you got to come down to Sam Ryder, who top 10. He was 6th in that distance of proximity. You had missed cuts, some clunkers, Will Zalatoris, Sam Burns, Peter Malnati. So not a lot of correlation in the 175 to 200. We did highlight, however, that if there was something from the proximity, would be from 200 plus. There was a lot more consistency. It's still not a strong correlation, but there's a lot more consistency here. Molinari top 10, Malnati top 10, Tringali top 20, runner-up top 10, intermixed with a middling finish from Justin Suh, top 30 from Louis, very clunker made cut from Kyle Mendoza, on down the line. So that was 2021. But you go back a couple years, so we'll look at 2020. Where am I at? Proximity. Again, doesn't look like a lot here. We'll look at the 175 to 200. Now this one was fairly strong and had no correlation in 2021. So middling finish, top 15, top 5, top 10, top 10, some more middling finishes, and then some top 20s down in here. 200 plus, again, about the same as far as correlation in 2020 from 175 to 200 and 200 plus. You had middling, top 30, middling, top 20, clunker, top 20, couple top 10s and such. What I'm getting at is year over year, the proximity 200 plus was pretty darn consistent. It wasn't a major factor, but it was consistent in how important it was. This 175 to 200 was erratic. It was, mildly or almost important some years, and then it didn't matter at all in other years. 200 plus was consistent. It was right there year over year in how much it was. And again, I apologize that it's getting scrunched, but I don't want to keep going from Excel to Fantasy National. So let me show you quickly what I'm talking about here. The 200 plus. So minus the outlier year that we just saw in 2020, again, you were anywhere between basically 60th and 70th. And even the 2020 year was a 73, which doesn't equal a lot of correlation, but it is consistent. Whereas in the 175 to 200, you had anywhere from 72 all the way down to 57. It was just kind of interspersed. It was, like I said, it was erratic. And instead of going for proximity total, which is a lower average than the 200 plus, I just felt more confident doing the 200 plus, knowing how long this course is. Most of the approaches will probably come from here. Although this might not be a bad thing to look at for guys who just can't reach some of these par fives in two. So that might be a metric that I put at the side tomorrow and put 0%, but something that I kind of use as a tiebreaker or whatnot. Let me come back to Fantasy National. So of the guys, and again, we'll come back to the reset. So of the guys that are in the field, the best players with approaches from 200 plus, and again, no metrics, no difficult, no long course, just 200 plus in the last 6 months: John Rahm, Matthew Wolff, Bryson, Sungjae, Ryan Palmer, Will Zalatoris, Hideki, Justin Thomas, Patrick Rodgers, and Maverick McNeely. Ryan Palmer is an interesting study this week in the sense that he has played this course, this tournament, extremely well. He is basically field average, just a little bit under on POA. He is okay when it's difficult, but he generally plays his best when it's easy. And you would think that the putting would kind of hold him back here. Putting is somewhat important here at Torrey Pines. You have to be able to lag putt, which is something else we're going to look at here in a bit, is the 3-putt avoidance. But when you look at his Farmers past performance, I mean, 4 for 4 in the past 5 years. He didn't play in 2017, but 4 for 4. Again, this is 2010, so I'm throwing that one out, basically. 4 for 4, 2 runner-ups, a top 15, and just outside the top 20, still a top 25. Now, his putting performance spiked in 1 year. So that's why his putting performance is showing so good specifically at Torrey Pines. Now, his around the green game has never been the best, especially here. So that is definitely some cause for concern. Sorry, I was expecting to see his strokes gain total up here. There it is. I've lost my mind. Strokes gain around the green, he's generally right around field average, so he's bad here. But his irons are very good here. He's always been good off the tee. He doesn't get enough credit for the amount of fairways and the distance that he has. He's not short by any means. So Ryan Palmer is a very interesting case study. He is very, very underrated this week. He is somebody that, especially in DFS, is going to be a target, I think, at least for me, depending on ownership. Now, the around the green is scary, and we looked at how much that comes into play kind of hidden here. But I like Ryan Palmer this week. I really do. Coming in fine form off a top 15 at the Sony. Another difficult, long course, the Houston. He played really darn well. Again, it was the short game, and it wasn't even that bad. His approaches were good. His off the tee was good. He had essentially a top 25. He was 26th. So a lot to like with Ryan Palmer this week. And that is the 200 plus. Ryan Palmer being 5th in that category. Since I mentioned it, let's look at the putting. Look a little bit in depth here. Make sure I add the POA and the fast metrics. And we'll bring it out, zoom out to the last 12 months. And one of the biggest things that I was looking at, I know I focused on this at the U.S. Open last year, is this 3-putt avoidance. And a lot of times I kind of just ignore it, but at Torrey Pines it is notorious. The greens are real slopey, real undulating, they're real fast. Even though the greens aren't big, because the course is different, you see the green, or the proximity to the hole is longer away than the average tour event, even with the smaller greens, is just telling you how difficult it is to get the ball close. 3 putts are a thing here. So lag putting is definitely going to be something that's important. So on fast POA greens, the top 10 guys who avoid 3 putts: Will Zalatoris, Mackenzie Hughes, Matt Jones, James Hahn, John Rahm, Bryce Garnett, Wyndham Clark, Jim Herman, Hideki, and Peter Malnati. So, again, a lot of guys who have popped a lot of times. John Rahm, Hideki, Will Zalatoris has popped a bunch. Bryce Garnett has popped on the putting metrics. Mackenzie Hughes, good putter. Snedeker, when he gets the pop putter rolling, good putter. Jordan Spieth. So, just more to the theme of overlapping statistics. Guys who are good at what they do, it generally plays out here at Torrey. So, there's the 3-putt avoidance that I wanted to make sure I hit on tonight. I didn't want to add Bermuda, you dumbass. Another thing that I have noticed today, and I mentioned it earlier, was this par 4, 450 to 500, with 60% of the par 4s here mattering. Doesn't matter. 60% of the par 4s at Torrey Pines, does it equate to leaderboard success? Well, let's take a look. Par 4 efficiency, 450 to 500. decently strong. Your winner last year, Patrick Reed, tied for first. Hagee, middling finish, top 20, top 30, runner-up, top 7. A lot of middling to clunker finishes, but then you've got a run here of very strong finishes. 20, 20, top 20, top 20, top 20, top 20. 2 runner-ups, top 10, top 20. Decently strong here in 2021. Decently strong. How about 2020? Par 4. 450 to 500. I mean, this right here can tell you a lot. Everybody in the top 15 was positive in this metric, and really only 2 of them were low in the metric. A lot of these guys are gaining quite a bit from this length. So when you look at it, really strong. Leader, or your winner, Mark Leishman, tied for the lead in strokes gained par 4, 450 to 500. So winner, top 10, middling, clunker. Then top 10, top 10, top 25, top 30, top 5, top 10, top 10, top 10, top 25, top 5, top 20. Major importance in 2020. One more year, 2019. We'll go and check the par 4s. 450 to 500. Not as strong as 2020, but still decent. Top 10, top 25, top 30. Middling, top 35, but middling. Top 5, top 10, top 25, top 5, top 20, top 20. So, yeah, it played a factor. It definitely does play a factor. So, seeing that, pretty strong correlation there. Who are the best players in the past 36 rounds? Make sure no filters are on. At the length of the par 4s here at Torrey Pines. Your top performers of the par 4s at Torrey Pines. Sung Jae, Maverick McNeely, John Rahm, Bryson, Lanto Griffin, Adam Schenk, Justin Thomas, Pat Perez, Dylan Fratelli, and Hayden Buckley. With Rory Sabatini, interestingly enough, and Taylor Pendrith lurking outside just the top 10. So again, more overlap. John Rahm, Bryson, Justin Thomas, McNeely pop a couple of times, especially in that, I believe it was the 200 plus metric that he jumped into the top 10 with. So 450 to 500, very, very important here at Torrey. I think the last thing that I want to look at specifically as far as digging into the data here in Fantasy National is the par 5s. And again, last night we noticed that no matter what, if you went from winners to top 5, even to top 10, the strokes gained par 5 are always the most important here. And, sometimes that can be a bit misleading. It's not here. I mean, we mentioned it last night. You have to take advantage of the par 5s here at Torrey Pines because those are really, yes, they're always the best birdie chances, but really it's kind of the only birdie chances you have here at Torrey. And you can see here, at least last year, of guys that finished in the top 15, there were only 2 that were negative in the par 5s. And when you sort by performance in the par 5s, there's all the here's the strongest correlation we have seen so far. Just listen to this in order, and this is about 12 golfers maybe. Top 10, top 20, runner-up, winner, runner-up. Top 10, top 20, top 20, top 30, top 10, top 10, top 20. That was in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, exactly the top 12 performers in the par 5s, no one finished outside the top 30. Very, very important here at Torrey. It was or at least it was last year. 2020, maybe last year was an outlier. And it wasn't. Again, in order, this is about, again, same 12, maybe 14 golfers. Here's the top performers and where they finished on strokes gained par 5. top 10, top 5, top 25, top 10, top 20. Runner-up, top 10, top 10, top 20, top 30, 10, 20, 25, 30. That is 3, 6, 9, 12. The top 14 performers on strokes gained par 5 did not finish again outside of the top 30. So that's 2 straight years where you have a massive correlation. And just to do one more year, 2019, par 5 efficiency, I mean, you can see just from here, of the guys who finished in the top 25, you've only got 2 who finished negative, and you've got some really, really high numbers in the strokes gained par 5. But just to sort it, strokes gained par 5, 2019, your top, we'll come down to maybe Sun Moon, 3, 6, 9, 12. So the top 15 performers in strokes gained par 5 at the 2019 Farmers, here's their finishes. Top 10, runner-up, top 5, winner. 20, 20, 20, 25, 30. Top 5, top 10, top 15, top 30, and then Sun Moon was last of the 15 as a top 35, so a middling finish. And then right after Sun Moon Bay, you have another run of top performances. It's so very important here. It really is. It's so very important at Torrey Pines to perform on the par 5s. So, with that being said, strokes gained, par 5, of the players who are in the field this year at the Farmers Insurance. Top performers on par 5s. Dustin Johnson, Taylor Gooch, John Rahm, Maverick McNeely, Aaron Wise are your top 5. Scotty Scheffler, Danny Lee, Bryson DeChambeau, Keith Mitchell, and Sung Jae round out your top 10. So, again, premier players, John Rahm. It's the first time Dustin Johnson has popped on the par 5s. But, again, Maverick McNeely pops on the par 4, 400, or 450 to 500 on the 200 plus, and now the par 5. So Maverick McNeely is somebody to kind of take an eye on. Aaron Wise has popped a couple of times now. Bryson's been there in a lot of categories. Sung Jae's been there in a lot of categories. So really, really, really good stuff there. I think the next thing that I'm going to look at, and this I originally had, was the American Express from this past week. And basically I mentioned how I'd be interested to see how much putting factored into Will Zalatoris's finish. Actually, he was bad. Just imagine if he actually made some putts. He might have won. But there's a quick look at the American Express and just the strokes gained there. John Rahm was negative around the green. He actually wasn't as high in the approaches or the off the tee that he normally is. So it was a little bit of a down week for him. I think the big spike performance, other than obviously Hudson Swafford's putting, don't sleep on Hudson Swafford's irons. He is a good iron player. 4.3 is obviously more than his baseline, but that's not out of the question for him. So that's not really a spike performance. Denny McCarthy, always a great putter. 5.4 is still, again, a bit over the baseline, but I would say that of the guys who popped, or at least were kind of spiked in performance, I don't think Brian Harman's irons are typically that great. Yeah, so Harman definitely spiked in the approach game. I mean, look at this. All the way back to the St. Jude in August, he had been negative on all of his measured rounds in strokes gained approach, and then he pops for 4.5 at the Amex. So that was definitely, at least in terms of recent form, an outlier performance. Now his putting has always been pretty darn solid. It's never been great off the tee, but that was certainly a spike performance. But what I want to do, honestly, is take a look at the U.S. Open from last year. All right, so let's take a look at the leaderboard from the U.S. Open last year. Let's look at strokes gained. And we definitely want to look at guys who putt well. That means they're at least somewhat comfortable with the Torrey Pines greens, the POA and such. John Rahm, very good performance, 3.8. Louis really popped, 7. Let's see, does Louis like POA? There you go, there's your answer. He is best on POA, but he's not been putting well lately. So take that with a little bit of grain of salt, but I mean, spike performances with the putter for Louis aren't uncommon. He's generally a good putter as it is. Let's see. Harris, English, Brooks, Scotty Scheffler. So don't take last year's U.S. Open performance at face value. Look here. He gained 8.5 strokes on the green. Good, but he's not that good. But you see here, look how important approach is, as we have talked about. Look how important the around the green was, which we just talked about earlier tonight. Let's take a look at a few other things here. Driving distance really wasn't that key last year for the U.S. Open. It was more so these greens and regulation, but just to give you an idea, you did have some, good finishes and astronomical, but it was more so these greens. I mean, look here, top 5. You had Johnny, who made the cut to a clunker finish. Daniel Berger, top 10. Bryson, top 30. Your winner, top 20, top 15, top 10. Greens and regulation were very, very important here. Let's take a look at par 4s, especially the 450 to 500. Yeah. Top 5, top 10, winner, top 5, top 15. Yeah, good stuff there. Finally, par 5s. Adam Scott was your leader. Top 35, so middling finish. Runner-up, top 10, top 20, top 30. You had, I think that's an amateur, Eric Cole. Performed well on the par 5s, missed the cut. But you come down after him. Oh, top 5, top 10, top 10, top 10, top 10. A lot. It's a lot. So yeah, that I definitely wanted to look at the U.S. Open from last year, just get an idea on who played well there, especially the guys that are in the field this week. Let's move over to Microsoft Excel and just get a good look of things that I have been looking at today. I brought this up last night. This is the performance of guys who are in the field this week, here specifically at the Farmers Insurance. So the U.S. Open is not in this. This is just strictly from the Farmers Insurance. I mentioned how Tony Finau and John Rahm were leading the way. They've played this event every year the past 5 years, and that's all I do. I go back 5 years. Each of them have averaged the top 10. Ryan Palmer's actually averaged the top 10 here. He's played it 4 times. Patrick Reed, your defending champion, averages a top 15 finish. Leishman won in 2020, averages a top 20. Let's do some sorting here. Let me grab all this. So, we looked at quite a few metrics tonight. Let's start with some of the obvious ones. I always prefer strokes gained approach. So, of the guys who have played here in the past 5 years, who is leading the way in strokes gained approach? And I did not want to do it that way. I need the largest to smallest. My apologies. So, in the past 5 years, the top performers in strokes gained approach here at the Farmers Insurance: Keegan, Matthew Neesmith, which he is always going to be popping on strokes gained approach. He just can't do a damn thing else, especially putt. There's Ryan Palmer, who's 3rd. Tom Hoagie is 4th. Again, very underrated ball striker. Very, very, very good. Let's see. Doc Redman. He had one very good performance and then he missed a cut. You can tell that because he's played this event twice. He's had an average finish of 72nd with a missed cut. So he had one very good performance and one maybe not so good. He averages 2.75 per tournament. Doc Redman's 5th, Wolf 6th, Cameron Young, Milano Grillo, Bramlett, Trainer, Norlander, about your top 10. So looking around the green, we saw how it was kind of a hidden statistic, if you will. Bill Hawes is your leader. He is 4 for 4 in making cuts. So if you're looking for a DFS play, maybe trying to sneak somebody through, because I'm willing to bet he's going to be very, very littly owned, because he has not played worth a shit in what feels like a long time. If you're looking for a dart throw, maybe Bill Hawes, but he's the leader of the past 5 years and around the green. You got Patrick Reed, Brant Snedeker, Justin Rose, Jason Duffner, Tony Finau, Max Homa, Nate Lashley, Hideki. Hideki's another name to watch this week. He's played this event every year the past 5 years. Averages a top 30 finish. No missed cuts. A little bit negative off the tee. Approaches are okay. Around the green's good. Poa's performance is good. Let's look at, I'm going to skip greens. Let's look at par fours. Specifically 450 to 500. 450 to 500. Who are the top performers past 5 years here? Aha. So you're starting to see some guys rise to the top here. Patrick Reed, your defending champion, leads. Matthew Wolff, Billy Horschel, Tony Finau, Brandon Wu, 1 appearance. Pat Perez, Kevin Chappell, 1 appearance. Siwoo, C.T. Pan, Nick Hardy, 1 appearance. Leishman, Snedeker, Gary Woodland, Will Zalatoris. So those are the guys who are taking advantage of the par fours that are most prominent here. And then lastly, let's take a look at the par fives. We saw just how important the strokes gained par 5 are. Your leaders in par 5 scoring here at the Farmers the past 5 years. Matthew Wolff, now that is one event. He did finish top 25, but it is one event, so take it with a tad bit of grain of salt. Lanto Griffin, Ryan Palmer, Justin Rose, Henrik Norlander, Joseph Bramlett, Will Zalatoris, Alex Noren's first time we've talked about him tonight. Alex Noren, there's John Rahm, Gary Woodland, Patrick Reed, Patrick Rodgers, Taylor Gooch. So that is some look at really digging into the weeds of the data. But that is going to do it for the Data Dive, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, tomorrow is the DFS Tactics show with the tournament going from Wednesday to Saturday. So make sure you get your wagers in early. Make sure you've got your DFS lineups all set by tomorrow night. Join me tomorrow night as we cover any last minute questions that you have. This player, that player, whatnot. Any wagers that you have made this week at the Farmers for any of your DFS lineups that you've already submitted, for any wagers that you're thinking about making here at the Farmers this week. May all your bets be profitable.